with all due respect, I wouldn't take what he said on ITV Southwest as being an absolute impossibility that we could end up with an election on May the 2nd if the level of unhappiness with Rishi Sunak within his own party mounts.
And on Diane Abbott, by the way, interesting that, wasn't it, Nadine, that Angela Rayner said she thought she should be back in the fold, brought back into the parliamentary party. I made the point earlier on talking to Kate McCann. Surely she wouldn't have said that unless she'd run it by Keir Starmer, in which case, if that's correct, surely she's going to be back soon.
I think I'm both black and Jewish, and I found this entire thing, as you can imagine, pretty exhausting. And Westminster really hasn't covered itself in glory over the last few months for various different reasons. But I think ultimately, whether the whip is restored, there'll have to be better communication between, I think, Diane Abbott and her people around her and leadership in Labour. It's significant that Angela Rayner has come out and said this. There is a lot of respect for Diane Abbott in Parliament, I think, across both sides of the House, by virtue of the fact she was the first black woman MP. And as a black person working in Parliament, I can tell you that it's a difficult place to be now. So I don't even know what she went through back in the 1980s when she was elected. So I think, there's a sense in Labour, from conversations that I've had, that people do want to find a way through this. But there is also, a lot of water under the bridge, as, Diane has written, I think, a few columns, I think one in The Independent and one in The Guardian, talking about, anti-black racism in the Labour Party that she feels may not have been dealt with properly. So, it's, in many ways, this Hester situation has kind of expanded into a broader issue about whether she should have the whip removed, and broader issues about race in politics. And I think ultimately, hopefully there can be a constructive and positive way through this, because it's exhausting to watch, so it must be exhausting to live
But
through.
Also, as we saw at Prime Minister's Questions, Keir Starmer's whole message is, I have changed my party.
Yes.
And that has meant, yes, taking a strong line against any suspicion of anti-Semitism, but also, frankly, purging it of Jeremy Corbyn and Corbynites.
Yes.
And Diane Abbott falls into that category as well. And so I think politically, to your point, did Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer talk this over? If they did, it points to quite an awkward U-turn by the leader.
Maybe it's one they can't avoid. I mean, I think we all know one of the reasons that the leadership were keen to see Diane Abbott on the outside rather than inside the tent was the trouble she's caused for the Labour leadership. She's
and because she wouldn't be able to stand as a Labour candidate at the next election.
Well, and so much a part of the Jeremy Corbyn setup. They were very glad to make the point of seeing her outside. But now she's been this target of this hideous, this racist language from the Tory party's biggest ever donor, and now she's almost the focus of admiration. I mean, people queuing up to sort of show sympathy for her in the House of Commons on the floor when she was the subject of all that discussion without actually getting called, which was bizarre. And then you see that Andy MacDonald, another left-winger who was suspended for saying things that were thought to be unacceptable about Gaza, he's been allowed back in. How do you justify keeping Diane Abbott out, even if you don't like her politics, even if you think she's an embarrassment to the leadership and way off message, which she is, way off message. But that in itself isn't a justification for keeping someone away from the parliamentary party.
Well, except the interpretation is what she said in her letter was anti-Semitic, basically.
Well, indeed, but Andy MacDonald was the same. And
Andy MacDonald was not anti-Semitic. Andy MacDonald was, for quoting the line from the river to the sea.
He was suspended on the basis that was thought to be a suspicious thing to say in the context of that
politically
debate.
and anti-Israel. I think as he said, and he's now been reinstated. So maybe. I just think it would be extraordinarily difficult for Keir Starmer to reinstate Diane Abbott on the basis of the positions which he staked out.
I think there needs, from what I've gathered from my conversations today, there just needs to be a line of communication about what the actual status of this investigation into her is.
No one seems able to say a word about
and it. I think that's that keeps coming up. Why is it taking so long? And I think that there just needs to be better communication on that issue. But regardless, the contribution she's made to the Labour Party, the contribution she's made to Parliament for black people is immense. And I think, as somebody who is Jewish, who was offended by that letter she wrote, as somebody who is black, who was deeply horrified by the kind of abuse she gets on a daily basis, I just hope there can be a constructive conclusion to all of this. And, where possible, avoid the politicking over it. Because I think one of the core problems overarching everything we saw with Lee Anderson, we're seeing with this, is bringing politics into racism, it just never works, and there has to be consistency both for the public but also for the people involved. And it's not easy to be an ethnic minority and report on this stuff and see this stuff day in, day out, and I just hope Westminster gets its act together. I really do.
Yeah, well, maybe Keir Starmer's got a bit longer to think about it all, because it's now official. The Prime Minister's announced in an ITV interview that he's not going to go for an election on May the 2nd. Not that I think anyone serious thought that was seriously going to happen.
There were people in Westminster who MPs, because one of the things that I said all the way back last year was, if he doesn't go in May, and then there's all these losses in the May locals, this kind of chorus of Tories who are angry and annoyed, whatever, it's going to get a lot louder. I don't know how many letters have been sent in. Would more go in? It's not a low risk strategy going.
I mean, I think events are moving very fast, and with all due respect, I wouldn't take what he said on ITV Southwest as being an absolute impossibility that we could end up with an election on May the 2nd if the level of unhappiness with Rishi Sunak within his own party mounts. I mean, I think
he's only got, what is it?
I mean,
another
another senior MP, I think it's Charles Walker today, making the point that if there was a move against him with people sending in letters to have a vote of confidence, I think he would almost be bound to call a general election rather than go ahead with a vote of confidence.
Yeah.
So, things could happen.
Yeah, I mean, he's only got, is it the 26th? Some say the 27th.
Yeah, I think it's then. Everyone's been eyeing the end of March. It's like, if it's not done by the end of March, then there won't
to
be.
dissolve Parliament and have an election campaign. Well, I take your point, Adam. I mean, you don't believe any word anyone says about this until...
Well, I believe what he said at the outset, that his working assumption was that he wanted an election in the second half of this year.
Yes.
But I just think events have overtaken quite a lot of prime ministers in recent years.
And also the bubbling unhappiness with the operation. And I genuinely do think if they have a bad May... and there's going to be a summer of recess where MPs aren't really doing anything and they're sitting around, and does he want to wait for that kind of train to hit him, or does he want to dodge it? And I think that is got to be factoring into it, because there is even the way that he managed with the number 10 operation on managing the Hester story, that there's just people are aghast with it, and in an election campaign, how will that operation fare?
I mean, he did say there's not going to be an election on May the 2nd. Well, that actually is strictly inaccurate. There are a lot of elections in England, local council elections, mayoral elections, and all the rest of it. Yeah. And I think it's fair to say, if he gets as far as there not being a general election on May the 2nd, it is perfectly possible that very bad results could, as you say, precipitate an election in June or July.
Yeah, trust you, Nadine, to introduce that dark thought.
I've been thinking it for months and months and months. I don't see how, given how unhappy so many Tory MPs are, and the whole, there was that.
Sorry, you picking that up as well. I mean, just the other day, and it impressed me. I'm sure I wasn't the only one when Tim Montgomery was here on this programme the other day, just a couple of days ago, and he said he wasn't giving his view that he doesn't think he's got a lot of time for Rishi Sunak, because we know he doesn't have a lot of time for Rishi Sunak. What he said was he's picking up from his conversations, and in that sense he was reporting, not commentating. He was saying, I'm picking up my conversations, the mood has changed, and I just don't believe Rishi Sunak. Tim said this, he stuck his neck out and said it. I don't think he's going to be there, said Tim, at the next general election as party leader. That impressed me.
It's just because I think he's reflecting what he's hearing from people in the party, and there is a lot of frustration. I think a lot of people thought Rishi would be better at the job than he has been. He's had a lot of bad luck, and a lot of things have gone wrong for him. But in an election year, polls should be narrowing. People should start to be feeling like they can pull it back, and actually, it's starting to feel like things are getting worse. And I just don't know how sustainable that is. Like, November is a long way away, and is he going to make it to November without that threshold of letters being held? I mean, there was an attempt, wasn't there, to increase the threshold for which a vote of no confidence could be triggered, I think, a few months ago, and that failed. So the threshold remains